Now, before discussing the types of elasticities, what's the meaning of the term elasticity? Let's have a look at it. Elasticity basically is a measure wherein we are taking two important factors, the change in one of the factors, to what extent it will elicit or have an impact and change in the second factor. The measurement of this is called as elasticity. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. In case of elasticity in economics, what we are doing is we are considering two factors. For example, price, demand, income, demand, the price, supply, etc. And with variation of these particular factors, that is one factor, to what extent it will have an impact on the second factor. The measurement of this is called as elasticity. There are four types of elasticities. One is price elasticity of a demand, PED. Second, income elasticity of a demand, IED. Third, cross elasticity of a demand, CED. And the fourth one is price elasticity of a supply, PES. These are the four types of elasticities. Let me start with the first one here. That is the price elasticity of a demand. Let me give a technical definition, then we'll have a discussion related to this. Price elasticity of a demand basically means if there is 1 unit change in price, to what extent or by how many units the demand will change. Is it okay? If there is a 1 unit change, rather than saying 1 unit, I can also simply say if there is a 1% variation in the price, to what extent there is a percentage variation in the demand. If that takes place and the measurement is done, such measurement is referred to as a price elasticity of a demand. And the representation or the formula for this is PD is equal to percentage change in the demand of a good X divided by percentage change in the price of the good X. Now how it is calculated, let me give a very simple idea here. But before I start the discussion with respect to calculation, in case of a price elasticity of a demand, we are not worried whether the outcome is a negative or a positive. The symbols are ignored here. The outcome is important. Understand the concept, how it is calculated. Let me give a very simple example. Imagine for a particular product, the price has changed from 10 rupees to 12 rupees. So the percentage increase in the price, percentage change in the price will be how much? 20%. I can understand the calculation here. It's a simple CSAT calculation. Price has changed from 10 rupees to 12 rupees for a particular commodity or a particular product. So the change in the price is how much? 20%. And when the price changes, obviously the demand should also change. Let's say hypothetically, I'm taking a hypothetical number here. The demand for this particular commodity earlier was 100 units. Now has fallen down to 96 units. Is it okay? Earlier it was how much? 100 units. Now has fallen down to 96 units. So in terms of quantity demanded, it has come down by 4 units. But in terms of percentage, the demand has come down by 4%. So here is the percentage change in the quantity being demanded, and here is the percentage change in the price of the product. Substitute both of them. What is the outcome? Based on that, you will decide whether the product is inelastic, elastic, etc. Now, substitute these particular numbers. In the numerator, how much is the percentage change in the demand? Again, please be very careful. While discussing price elasticity of demand, yes, the demand has come down. So, technically, we must be writing that it is minus 4%. That is, the demand has come down by 4%. But in case of price elasticity of demand, do not worry about symbols. Do not worry whether it is positive or negative, and apply this only in the context of PED. Now, how much percentage variation has been found in case of demand? 4% variation. And how much percentage variation has been found in case of price of the commodity? 20% variation. So what is the outcome? The outcome is, right, 4 ones are, 4 fives are, outcome is 0.2. Is it okay? Outcome is 0.2 here. And whenever you have an outcome like this, using this, you can find out whether the good is an essential good, whether the good is a non-essential or a luxury product, etc. Now, the classification using this, right, you can infer that whenever the price elasticity of a demand is lower than 1. Is it okay? Whenever it is lower than 1, such type of goods are called as inelastic goods. I'll repeat it. Whenever the PED outcome is less than 1, these are types of goods are referred to as inelastic goods, and generally these are essentials. Okay, the essential goods will generally exhibit that the price elasticity of demand is less than 1. And why this happens? If the price varies, let's say by 20%, you will not suddenly change the demand for this particular good, right? The demand change will happen, but the change in the demand will not be very high but marginal, right? For example, imagine the price of rice increases by 50%. Have you understand this? Price of rice increases by 50%. You will change your consumption, right? Marginally you will reduce your consumption, or you might hold it constant also, but argument here is you will not drop your consumption by a large margin. Have you understand this? Overall in the economy, yes, there is a slight decrease in the consumption, because the price has increased. All the people will not be able to afford or purchase the same amount of rice now. So obviously there is a slight variation in the demand, but it will be just marginal. Small amount of a demand variation is going to take place. That is the reason we'll generally say that PED is less than 1. Price elasticity of demand is less than 1. What about PED greater than 1? Right, whenever PED is greater than 1, generally we'll refer to these particular products as elastic goods. Is it okay? We'll refer to these particular products as elastic goods. That is, the luxurious products or the products which are luxurious, the demand for them is affected even if there is a slight variation in the prices. For example, me and most of you, assuming you are coming from, let's say, middle class households, whenever the price of the product rises, especially for luxuries, we are very much price conscious with respect to that. And trust me, Indians are very price conscious. And whenever the price of these particular luxuries varies marginally like this, we will simply say these are luxuries. We don't need them to sustain the day-to-day activities. Hence, the demand abruptly comes down, or demand impact is much higher compared to the price variation. Right? That is the reason you will have a PED greater than 1. In addition to this, there is a PED equal to 1, which is also referred as unitary elastic products, wherein the percentage variation in the price is equal to percentage variation in the demand, right? In addition to these three classifications, in the context of PED, you will also have a perfectly inelastic, perfectly elastic, etc. And generally, you will have these kinds of representations when you have PED is equal to 0 and PED is equal to infinite. And whenever PED is equal to 0, we'll refer to this as a perfectly inelastic and this one perfectly elastic. What is the meaning of this? This is perfectly inelastic. But how do we arrive at PED is equal to 0? Let's have a look at this. Right? When PED formula is percentage change in the demand divided by percentage change in the supply. How can I get an outcome of 0 here? You can get an outcome of 0 only when your numerator is equal to 0. Have you understand this? In the denominator, you can place anything. Price changes by 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. But in the numerator, if the demand doesn't change, I can understand this. If the demand doesn't change at all, then the numerator becomes 0. Right? So 0 divided by any percentage, outcome will be 0. And that is the precise reason whenever you talk about perfectly inelastic goods, we'll simply say price elasticity of a demand is 0. Meaning what? The price of the commodity might be changing either upwards or downwards. The demand for the commodity remains the same. I can understand this. The demand for the commodity remains the same. Such type of goods are referred as perfectly inelastic goods. And on the other hand, perfectly elastic goods, right? These are the types of goods wherein the demand is changing, but the price is not changing. The price variation is 0%, right? But the demand for the products in terms of percentages is changing. Such type of products are referred to as perfectly elastic goods. And in case of perfectly elastic goods, you will have an outcome of infinity. And how can you get an outcome of infinity within this particular formula? When the denominator is 0, irrespective of the numerator, outcome will become infinite. Okay, so this is basically the application of a concept of price elasticity of demand. Second, income elasticity of a demand, IED. What do you mean by income elasticity of demand? If there is a 1% variation in your income, how much percentage variation is observed in a demand? Is it okay? If income of a person changes by 1%, either increases or decreases, doesn't matter. If there is a unit percentage variation in the income of a consumer, by how much percentage the demand changes, that measurement is called as income elasticity of a demand. Okay. Now the formula for income elasticity of a demand is, in the numerator we'll place a percentage change in the demand for a particular good, and in the denominator we'll simply place a percentage change in the income. Now when we apply this and get an ID less than 0, income elasticity of demand is less than 0, will refer to those particular goods as inferior goods, and in case of ID greater than 0, will refer to these particular goods as normal goods. Now, what is the meaning of this? Let's take an example here. When the income of a person increases, let's say by 10%, okay, income increases by 10%. So increases means, right, plus 10%. But a particular commodity, let's say inferior quality of a rice. So the demand as well as the consumption of this particular inferior quality of a rice falls down by, let's say, 4%. Is it okay? Falls down means what? It decreases by 4%. Replace that in the formula here. Right, so IED is equal to, numerator is minus 4% and denominator is plus 10%. So percentage cancelled. What is the outcome? Minus 0.4. Is it okay? ID here is minus 0.4. As a result of this, right, understand this, as a result of this, I'll simply say, whenever income elasticity of a demand is less than a 0, less than 0 essentially means what? I hope you remember the concept of a number line. In case of a number line, anything to the left hand side of the 0 will be negative, and anything to the right hand side of the 0 will be positive. Anything over 0 is positive. Anything below 0 or less than 0 is negative. That is what I am doing here. Whenever ID is a negative, I'll simply write this as ID less than 0. And whenever ID is less than 0, these are referred to as inferior goods. And whenever ID is greater than 0, these are referred to as normal goods. I have given an example of an inferior good. What about the normal good? Let's say, for example, the income of a particular person increases by 20%. And as a result of this, he will start consuming more and more of basmati rice. Or he'll start consuming more and more of a quality foods in the market. And when he will start consuming more, can I simply say that the demand will also increase? So let's say the demand for basmati rice increases by, let's say, 5%. Is it okay? It increases by 5%. Or let's say by 10%. Have you understand this? So when the demand increases, right, it is numerator is a positive. When income increases, denominator is positive. Replace this particular numerator and denominator with these numbers. If imagining the demand has increased by 10% with a rise in the income of 20%, what is the outcome? Outcome is 0.5. But rather than saying 0.5, can I simply say that ID greater than 0? Greater than 0 essentially means what? Positive. So whenever ID is greater than 0, we'll simply refer to this as a normal good. Okay. So remember this. ID less than 0, inferior good. ID greater than 0, right? It's a normal good. That is the application of income elasticity of a demand. Now same thing will apply it in real life. There is one law which is referred to as Angel's law. And as per this particular Angel's law, whenever the income of a particular person increases, understand this very carefully. Whenever income of a particular person increases, the absolute expenditure or expenditure on essentials will increase but not proportionately. I will repeat the statement here. It is confusing. Understand this very carefully. Whenever income of a particular person increases, the expenditure done by the person on the essentials such as food increases but not proportionately. What is the meaning of this? Let's say hypothetically, a particular person has an income of 100 rupees. Out of 100 rupees, let's say hypothetically 40%. And whenever talking about percentage, you can use it to calculate proportions. Okay. So out of 100 rupee, he is spending 40 rupees on essentials such as food. And since he is spending 40 out of 100, how much percentage of income is being spent on essentials? 40% of the income. Now, when his income increases from 100 to, let's say, 500 rupees. Okay, income increase from 100 to 500. will he increase the expenditure on food? Rather than spending 40, will he increase his expenditure on food or essentials? Yes. Rather than spending 40, now he might be spending, let's say, 100 rupees. Is it okay? His expenditure on food increases. This increased from 40 to 100. I'll call this as absolute expenditure or expenditure on essentials. So when the income has increased, the expenditure on essentials also has increased, but it is not increasing in the same proportion. Earlier, the expenditure on food comprised of 40% of the income. Is it okay? The expenditure on essentials such as food comprised of 40% of the expenditure. But now, since he's spending 100 rupee, 100 out of 500 will be just 20%. Is it okay? 100 out of 500 is just 20% of his income. So, with a rise in the income, expenditure on essentials such as food will increase, but it is not going to increase proportionately. Rather, in terms of proportion, it is always going to decline. For example, imagine further his income increases from 500 to 1000 rupees. Will he increase his expenditure on food? Yes, it might increase from 100 to 150 rupees. So is there increase? Absolute expenditure, has it increased? Yes. But look at the percentage. Out of 1000, now he is spending 150 rupees on food, which translates to how much? 15% of his income. So with a rise in the income, his expenditure has increased, but it is not increasing proportionately. Rather, in terms of percentages, it is always going to keep on declining. This is the application of Angel's law. Okay, the proportionate expenditure on food falls as the income rises, though the actual expenditure or the absolute expenditure keeps on increasing. Now, what is the application of this? What do you infer this? Why I'm discussing this Angel's law in the context of income elasticity of a demand? Understand this very carefully. Whenever you're talking about income elasticity of a demand for essentials, okay, whenever you're going to talk about income elasticity of a demand for essentials, it will always be higher than 0 but below 1. Is it okay? It will always be higher than 0 and will be below 1. It will never hit 0. It will never hit 1. It will always be between this particular 0 and 1. Now some of you will get confused and say, sir, how? How do you arrive to this particular conclusion? Now understand this. Whenever you're talking about the income elasticity of a demand, income changes, so the demand should also change. But in case of essentials, what happens is, with the rise in the income, your expenditure also increases. Right? Same thing can be said vice versa also. With the rise in the income, your expenditure also increases. But it is not going to increase in the same proportion. Meaning what? If your income increases, let's say by 100%, is it okay? If your income increases by 100%, your expenditure on food is not going to increase by 100%. It will be less than 100%. Have you understand this? Imagine your income has increased from 100 to 500. How much is the percentage change here? 400%. But how much is the change in the expenditure here? It is just 250%. Have you understand? So, whenever your income increases, your expenditure on food increases, but it doesn't increase in the same proportion as is your rise in the income. And that is the precise reason I'm saying that when income increases, expenditure increases. So, numerator positive, denominator positive. Right? Can I simply say it will be higher than 0? Yes. But it is also guaranteed that the numerator and denominator will not become equal, because the rise in the expenditure on essentials is never equal to the rise in the incomes of a person. And that is the precise reason numerator and denominator will never become equal. Numerator will always be lesser than the denominator. So when the numerator is lesser than the denominator, can we attain an outcome of 1 under income elasticity of demand? No, you cannot get equal to 1. And that is the precise reason in case of essentials we say that it will definitely be above 0 but below 1. That is the income elasticity of demand in case of the essentials. So this is the application of Angel's law in the context of the income elasticity of a demand. The third type of elasticity is the cross elasticity of a demand. Now earlier what we have done in the context of IED as well as PED, we have considered the same product. One product, what will happen to demand for the product when the price changes or when the income changes. But when you talk about the cross elasticity of a demand, we are not only focused on one product, we are focused on multiple products. That is, we will be discussing the concept of related goods under the cross elasticity of a demand. Now let's take a simple example here. Tea and coffee. These are substitutes. And earlier we have seen that whenever the price of tea increases, okay, whenever the price of tea increases, what will happen to demand for coffee? The demand for the coffee will also rise up. Is the logic okay here? These are substitutes. So price of tea increases, obviously demand for tea will come down and people will start substituting tea with coffee. So the demand for coffee will increase. So in case of substitutes, with the rise in the price of one, demand for the other substitutes will start rising upwards. Apply that in case of cross elasticity of a demand. Right? CED measures the change in the demand of one product with unit change in the price of another product. Right? In this particular case, we are discussing substitutes. What will happen? Substitute the numbers here. In case of CED, price of tea increases. So denominator is a positive and the demand for coffee also increases. Numerator is also positive. Is it okay? Just to put things in perspective, imagine the price of tea increases from 10 rupees to 12 rupees. So increase by 20%. So demand for coffee increase from let's say 100 units to 130 units. So rise in the demand is also positive. Right? So 30% divided by 20%. Whatever the outcome, don't worry about the number here. Positive divided by positive. What should be the outcome? The outcome should be positive or greater than 0. So whenever CED is greater than 0, we'll simply refer to these goods as a substitute goods. Is it okay? For the substitute goods, the CED is greater than 0. What about complementary goods? Right? For example, let's say printer and ink. Okay, printer and ink. So these are complementary goods, right? So the price of the printer increases. What will happen to demand for the printers? Will come down. And when the demand for the printers is coming down, what do you think will happen to demand for the ink? Demand for the ink will also come down. I can understand this. Price of the printer increases. Demand for the ink will come down. Let's put it in numbers. Imagine the price of the printers has increased from 100 rupees to 110 rupees. So increase by 10%, positive. Demand for the ink, okay, the demand for the ink has come down from let's say 100 units to let's say an arbitrary number 85 units. So there is a decline in the demand of how much? 15%. And because it is a decline, I will have to use a negative symbol here. So replace these two numbers in the formula. In case of cross elasticity of demand here, numerator is minus 15%, denominator is a plus 10%. Whatever the number is, right, whatever is the outcome is, do not worry about this. Focus on the symbol of the outcome, right? Negative divided by positive, the outcome will be what? Negative. And rather than saying negative, can I simply say it is less than 0? So understand this. For complementary goods, we have started with an example of a complementary goods. For complementary goods, CED is less than 0. Okay, CED is less than 0 or CED is negative. This is the application of cross elasticity of a demand. Right. So far what we have seen is with respect to demand side, one, price elasticity of a demand, income elasticity of a demand, and third one is cross elasticity of a demand. Now with respect to supply side, there is one elasticity of supply, that is a price elasticity of supply, PES. What is the PES? It basically measures with 1% change in the price, how much will be the percentage change in the supply of a commodity. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. With 1% change in the price, by how much percentage the supply of the commodity is going to change. Right? That measurement is called as price elasticity of a supply. Same formula, but only thing is rather than writing demand, now we are going to use the term supply. Okay, so in the numerator, percentage change in the supply divided by percentage change in the price. And whenever, right, the outcome is less than 0 or negative, these, right, are basically referred to as the goods which will have inelastic supply. And when it is greater than 0, these goods will have elastic supply. And again, just like price elasticity of demand. Even in this particular case, there is a perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, etc. You don't have to mug up everything, right? This is more than sufficient. Now, this is a discussion with respect to the elasticities. Now, some of you might be thinking, sir, what is the need for learning these particular elasticities in the first place? Because there is so much of a formula, so much of analysis or inferences that you need to make. What is the importance of this? As usual, questions could be asked in the UPSC prelims. That should be the most important reason for you to learn this. In addition to this, what if incomes of the households are changing? What kind of impact that is having on, let's say, the consumer goods in the market or normal goods in the market, the essential goods in the market? And don't you think that study is very important for the government, for the market as such? Right? So the government will have its own policy, let's say with respect to taxation policy. If government of India imposes a tax, the market price of the goods are going to change. And if the tax rate is increased, market price is expected to increase. Tax rates brought down, it is expected to reduce the market price of the commodities. So with a variation in the price which can happen because of the government taxation, to what extent this will have an impact on the demand for the goods and services in the market? Do you think that is very, very important for the government to understand? Definitely yes. So with variation in the incomes, with variation in the prices, with variation in the supply in the market, right, we need to analyze these particular factors, to what extent it will have an impact on supply as well as the demand factors in the market. And that is the precise reason why government as well as the private sector will keep analyzing these particular elasticities. Done? So this is a discussion with respect to elasticities. Now, earlier we have discussed that whenever the price of the good changes and the demand also changes, but while discussing that, I had mentioned that always this kind of a change might not be observed in the market. There are certain exceptions. There are certain factors which will definitely have an impact on how much is the change in the supply, demand, etc. And that is basically listed in the form of determinants in the market. Right? What are the important determinants? One, is there availability of a substitute or not? If the substitutes are easily available, generally what we see is there is a sudden change in the market with respect to demand for these particular goods. For example, imagine two products are there, similar products, right? Or let's say substitutes. If the price of the one increases, if the second product, which is a substitute, which is easily available in the market, consumers tend to shift to the second product very, very easily and quickly. Because this is available in the market, the shifting happens much faster. Is it okay? So the availability of a substitutes will also determine whether the change in the demand is going to be observed with the change in the price or not. Second, is the good essential or a non-essential? Right? Essential or a luxury? Don't you think that will also have an impact on how quickly or how soon or how slowly the consumers change the demand in the market? If the product is very much essential, you might see a very marginal change in the demand. If the good is non-essential, let's say luxury product, the demand variation will be much, much higher. There may not always be a change in the demand, as a reaction to price takes some amount of a time. That is generally in case of the economy, it has been seen that the households generally try to adjust within the budget that they have generally have. And if within the budget constraint or within this particular allocated budget, if they are unable to make adjustments, only and only then generally it has been seen that there is a change in the demand. For example, imagine there is a household, price of the onion changes, price of certain commodity changes. Immediately there is no change in the demand, because in the household generally they will try to absorb this particular market information, and when they realize that within the constraint of the money that they have, they'll not be able to meet the earlier demand, only and only then they will change the demand or consumption patterns, right? So there is a time horizon, there is some time that is taken by these particular consumers in the market to absorb as well as change the consumption pattern or demand pattern. And finally, right, connected to the third point, only when there is a higher impact or effect on the budget, same budget or within the limited availability of resources, same consumption cannot be continued, only and only then there is a change or there is a pattern change in terms of demand in the market. So these are some of the other factors which will determine to what extent, how soon, how slowly, or how quickly the demand patterns or consumption patterns will change in the market. Now, having understood the concept of elasticities, let's try and understand the last concept within the introduction module, the concept of savings, investment, and capital formation.